In today's video, I will show you 2 techniques that you need to know for French beading. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, my name is Ben Lee, bead instructor here at the Bead Flora studio. Today I will go over with you 2 variations of the basic frame technique and lacing. Most of my beginner patterns use these 2 techniques together, so I want to get a deep dive video on the basic frame and lacing in one prerequisite video for you to refer to. If you want an in-depth info on materials, how to string beads on wire, and more, check out this video. Let's get into it. I already have some size 11 green seed beads on a spool of 24 gauge green copper core wire. The technique that we'll be learning today is called the basic frame. And let's start out with 3 beads. Straighten out the wire here. And let's mark the spot here. This is about 1 inch. So take this wire here, hold on here. And we're going to make a cross at that 1 inch mark. So it's kind of like making a loop, but just with bare wire. And then hold on to the cross here between your finger and your thumb and twist. Okay, so what we made here is called the basic frame. So this whole framework is called the basic frame. And when you see patterns, you will see, it will start out with the number of beads, 3 beads. So it would be a 3 bead basic. So when a pattern calls for a 3 bead basic, you would start out with a basic frame with 3 beads on the top wire here. And this wire here is called the top basic wire. This is the twisted wire. And this is the basic loop. And this is the working wire or the spool wire because it's obviously connected to the spool still. Okay, now let's feed the beads on to the working wire. And line it up with the first row, or right next to the first row. And remove any excess beads right before the top basic wire here. Put your unit here right over your forefinger and hold it with your thumb. You just want to be able to see that little smidge of space so you can see where you are wrapping, because you have your exact number of beads ready. So you don't want it to like mess that up. So hold on to it. So we're going to wrap at a 90-degree angle. We're going to go straight behind and back to the front. Okay, so now we have our first 2 rows. Feed more beads on. Then the working wire down along with the beads there, and turn this around like this. And like I said before, I always like to turn my work so that I'm always wrapping with the wire facing up. So again, I'm going to go behind, but remove any excess beads. I got 1 extra bead here. Go behind and then back to the front. So what we have here is a 3 bead basic with a rounded top and rounded bottom because we wrapped at that 90-degree angle, straight back and straight to the front. You're creating a rounded top. Okay, now we're going to make 5 rows with this. Push your beads so that it covers all of the wire here. And just like I showed you before, hold on to each section bit by bit as you wrap. Remove any excess beads. Go behind, back to the front. So now we have our 4th row All right, so feed the beads to cover the bare wire. Wrap it around. Go behind, back to the front. So now we have a 3-bead basic with 5 rows, rounded top and rounded bottom. I'm going to show you how to finish this. So just wrap the working wire down just a little bit here, just maybe once. And then cut along here. Straighten everything out. And I like to take my pliers and just to tuck that little wire bit in. And cut the top, leaving about 1/8 of an inch left. Turn this around and bend it down. These 2 wires here are called the bottom wires, and in most patterns it's most common to just leave the 2 bottom wires. And other patterns will call for you to have 1 bottom wire. And that basically means that you want to reduce it to 1 bottom wire. And the reason why you may want to do that is you want to reduce the bulk of the stems when you're assembling. And so again, I have some beads already strung on a spool of green copper core wire. The pattern calls for 3-bead basic, so let's move 3 beads down and make a basic frame with 3 beads, just like we did with the practice leaf, and leave 1 inch for the top basic wire, and make the twisted wire and loop to be 2 inches. So from here to here, you want it to be about 2 inches. And the reason why I'm having the twisted wire and the loop to be so short is because we'll be reducing the bottom wire later. And I'll show you that. In the prerequisite lesson, I showed you how to do the rounded top and rounded bottom. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to do a pointed top and pointed bottom. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So let's feed some beads on. Line this up with the first row. Now remember, when we did the rounded top, we had it like this at a 90-degree angle. And in order to make a pointed top, you want to have the wire facing at this angle. You'll be wrapping at a 45-degree angle, like this. If you wrap like this, you get a round top. If you wrap at this angle, you get a pointed top. Okay, so hold on to the unit here. Go around at this angle and back to the front. See that? Okay, so before we do anything, don't push this wire down yet. Feed the beads on, and then at this point, push it down. You see? Now you see this point at the top here. And you can fix it, jiggle it to get it right before you make the next wrap. Okay, so we're going to turn this counterclockwise. Put it over your finger, put your thumb over it. And we're going to do the same thing. Have this at a 45-degree angle. Remove the excess beads. And wrap at this angle. You see that? Okay. So again, before we do anything, push the beads up. Push it down. Now it's nice and pointed. So right now we have a 3 bead basic, pointed top, pointed bottom, 3 rows. And for this pattern, we want to have 5 rows total. So let's keep going. Before you wrap, you want to shape it, right? Make sure it's where everything is supposed to be. If it's out of shape and you wrap it, it's going to be out of shape. Okay, so this is the last row here. And because we are reducing it to 1 wire, what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo a whole bunch of twists here. I just want 1 wire because when we assemble, I don't want it to be so bulky. So cut right here so that it's 1 wire here. And I like to go down just a little bit, about 1/8 inch, just because I just want that stability in the wire. Just as when we're wrapping, I just want it there just so that it's just, I just like that it's more sturdier, right? Because I don't want to cut right here. But I don't want 2 bottom wires or else it'd be too bulky. So let's cut this here. And again, I'm going to gently now, okay, because we don't want to have this bottom wire break. In this segment, I'm going to show you 3 different methods of lacing. And what lacing essentially is sewing the rows together so that you get a much neater look. Generally, we like to use 30 gauge wire for lacing. You can also use thinner wire like 32 or 34 gauge, but you might have a harder time using the thinner wires. And 30 gauge wire is that nice fine line where it is easy to work with. It is easier to work with, and it won't show on the final product as much. For our first method, I'm going to show you how to lace from one side to the other or lacing across. And I'm going to use a green and also a thicker lacing wire just so that you can see better. This is a 28 gauge lacing wire. It is a lot heavier, so it shows a lot better on camera, but you do want to use 30 gauge wire or finer. And the way that you gauge the amount of wire that you need for lacing is to measure out 3 widths of the unit that you are lacing. So I'm just going to measure out 3 widths, and this is about 2.5, maybe about 3 inches of wire. All right, and we do want to start from the back. So we're going to lace along right across the middle of the unit here. So let's place the wire right along the middle of the unit. Just hold on to it so it doesn't fall off. And then we're going to take this wire and insert it in between the first and the second row. And it went through. So hold on to it tightly. All right. And wrap it around that first row. And we're going to take that and wrap it around one more time. Because it is the first row, you do want to lace it twice. All right. So now we are going to start our first stitch. So now let's take our lacing wire and put it in between Just read it between the second and the third row. And flip so you can see where you are going. You always want to see where you are going. And then after you flipped it over to the front, we're going to insert the lacing wire in between the first two rows. And then if you look on the back, you have created your first stitch right there. All right, so now let's put our lacing wire in between the next two rows. And then so on and so forth. It is a lot heavier to use the 28 gauge wire, so I do not recommend it for lacing. It is a lot harder to work with, and it shows a lot more, which is great for demonstration, but for actually for your actual units that you're going to do, I recommend 30 gauge or thinner if you can handle it, if you can handle the 32 or the 34. But these days, I prefer the 30 anyways. All right, so now this is the last row. So you want to wrap it around twice. Okay, so now we're going to take our wire cutters and trim and trim, and then tuck it in. Now the second method of lacing is called starting from the center. And generally, I don't use this method of lacing. I either lace starting from one side to the other, going across, or I use the lacing as you go method, which is basically lacing as I am beading. But I still want to show you this method. So I have our lacing wire already cut, about 3 inches. So take the lacing wire and fold it in half, and this is the front of the wire here. And you want to take this wire and straddle the center row, pull it, now turn it to the back and cross the wires. Now we're going to take this wire and lace it this way. So take this wire, insert it in between this row and this row. Now we have our first stitch in between the center row and the row right next to it. Okay, so now we're going to insert our lacing wire in between this row and this row. Okay, and so on and so forth. So now we have this side lace. We're going to take this lacing wire and lace this way. I'm just going to flip it over And as you can see, I like to flip my unit so I can see where I'm going. Always flip. And this third method of lacing that I'm going to show you is called lacing as you go, and which is essentially lacing as you are beading. We are starting from the center and then lacing each row in as we are beading it. So I already have a length of lacing wire already cut. We're going to fold it in half just like we did with the second lacing method. And let's insert it into the center and straddling the center row, bring it to the back and cross the wires. So now we're going to take this wire and lace the row in. And take this row and lace it in. And you may need to redo your third row. Sometimes it gets loose, which is fine. So I just undid it and I'm just going to rewrap it. Right. If it's easier, you can make the fourth row and then do your start your lacing wire. So now we have our 3 rows and lacing wire started. We're going to do our 4th row. So I'm just going to flip it here so that this is facing up. All right, so I'm going to bend this down here to form the row along the previous row. So we're just worrying about one section at a time, right? So this is where the lacing wire is. So we have the beads right here. Take the lacing wire, bring it over, bring it to the back. So now we have the bottom part of the 4th row laced in. Okay, so now we don't have to worry about the bottom of the row. And because we are working bit by bit, it's a lot easier and more digestible to work with. It may not seem like it with such a small row right now, but once the rows get longer, it is definitely a lot easier. It makes your work also neater, so that's another benefit. Okay, so I'm gonna make this row. Okay, so now we're gonna worry about the top of the row. All right, so bend this down. I like to flip it so I can see where does this go. So I'm going to lace this in right here. Or I can remove the beads so I can easily see where I'm lacing. Okay. All right, so now we are on to the next row. And again, I like to flip so I can see where I'm going, where I'm wrapping, where the wire is. Sometimes if you don't flip, you just don't know where that wire is and it gets all crooked. But having a crooked lacing wire is not such a big deal. This lacing wire that I have here is not completely straight either. And sometimes it's just based on how the beads are lying. So you see this lacing wire, it went up just a little bit, and that can't be helped because if I go down this way, it's either going up or it's going down. So it can't be helped. It can't be completely straight sometimes, and that's okay. All right, so I'm going to finish this row. Okay, so we're going to trim these. And tuck. So in this segment of lacing, we learn about lacing from one side to the other, lacing across. We did lacing starting from the center, and also we did lacing as you go. If you would like to learn more about French beaded flowers, you may be interested in my 2 French beading books. My first book, Bead Flora, The Revival of French Beaded Flowers, will walk a beginner step by step on how to make bead and wire flowers. And my second book, Bead Flora, French Beaded Branches and Bloom. This book features realistic branching blooms changing through the seasons using some very interesting technique gymnastics. You can find signed copies on my website or at all major book retailers online.